parents left me at a gas station at the age of 10. I survived. Years later, they want me back. Have you ever been forgotten? Not just overlooked for a moment, but truly, completely abandoned? I'm talking about the kind of abandonment that changes everything. The kind that forces a child to become an adult overnight. My name doesn't matter anymore. Not the one they gave me anyway. But my story? My story matters because it's about survival, resilience, and the moment when the people who destroyed you realize what they've lost. This is the day my parents left me at a gas station when I was 10 years old, and how I built an empire from absolutely nothing. Picture this, a dusty highway gas station somewhere in Nevada, the kind of place where tumbleweeds actually roll across the parking lot. It's summer, scorching hot, and I'm 10 years old wearing a faded superhero t-shirt that's 2 sizes too small. My parents' beat-up sedan is parked at pump number 3. I remember the number because I stared at it for hours afterward, like somehow memorizing it would make them come back. They told me to go inside and use the bathroom. Simple enough, right? I was a good kid. I did what I was told. The bathroom was disgusting. Graffiti on the walls, a flickering light, the smell of cheap cleaning products mixed with something far worse. I washed my hands, splashed some water on my face because of the heat, and walked back outside. The parking spot was empty. Now, I know what you're thinking. Maybe they just moved the car. Maybe they were parked somewhere else and I forgot. But no, I checked the entire lot, all 12 parking spaces. I ran around that gas station 3 times, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would burst out of my chest. The car was gone. They were gone. The cashier inside, a tired-looking woman with graying hair and kind eyes, she noticed me after about 20 minutes. I must have looked absolutely terrified because she came out from behind the counter and knelt down to my level. "Honey, where are your parents?" she asked. I couldn't answer. My throat had closed up. Tears were streaming down my face, but I wasn't making a sound. Shock does that to you. She brought me back inside, gave me a bottle of water and a bag of chips. She tried calling the police, but here's where it gets dark. Here's where you realize this wasn't an accident. When the police arrived 2 hours later, they checked the security cameras. They watched my parents pull up, watched me go inside, watched me come back out. And here's the thing that still haunts me to this day. They watched my father look back at the gas station in his rearview mirror before driving away. He knew. They both knew. The police tried to track them down using the license plate, but the car was registered to an address 3 states away, a place they'd abandoned months before. My parents were ghosts, and they wanted to stay that way. I learned later, much later, that they'd been planning this. They'd been moving around, avoiding bills, avoiding responsibility, and I was just another responsibility they decided to dump. Social services got involved. I spent the first night in a hospital, being evaluated, being asked questions I couldn't answer because my brain was still trying to process what had happened. A child psychologist sat with me, her voice soft and patient. "Do you understand what's happening?" she asked. I nodded, even though I didn't. Not really. How could I understand that the 2 people who were supposed to love me unconditionally had just erased me from their lives? I was placed in emergency foster care the next day. The Miller family. They were nice enough, an older couple whose own children had grown up and moved away. They had a spare bedroom with blue walls and a window that looked out at their neighbor's fence. Mrs. Miller made meatloaf on Wednesdays and always asked if I'd done my homework. Mr. Miller worked at a hardware store and smelled like sawdust and motor oil. But I wasn't their kid. I was a project, a good deed. I could see it in the way they looked at me, with pity mixed with confusion, like I was a puzzle they couldn't quite solve. And maybe I was. I'd stopped talking almost completely. I went to school, did my work, came home and sat in that blue bedroom staring at the fence. I was waiting. Part of me still believed they'd come back, that this was all a mistake, that any day now I'd hear that beat-up sedan pull into the driveway. They never came. Months passed, then a year. I cycled through 3 more foster homes, each one a different flavor of temporary. There was the house with 6 other foster kids, where you had to fight for food at dinner. There was the single mom who meant well but worked 2 jobs and was never home. There was the religious couple who spent more time praying for my soul than actually talking to me. By the time I was 13, something inside me had fundamentally changed. I stopped waiting. I stopped hoping. I realized that if I was going to survive, if I was going to be anything more than a forgotten kid from a gas station, I had to do it myself. Nobody was coming to save me. I started working at 14, under the table, of course, since I was too young for legal employment. I washed dishes at a local diner, worked early mornings before school. The owner, Carlos, he knew my situation. He paid me in cash and fed me meals that didn't come out of my paycheck. That money went into a coffee can I kept hidden in my latest foster home. Every dollar was a step toward freedom. School became my escape and my weapon. I threw myself into it with an intensity that worried my teachers. I studied during lunch, stayed late in the library, devoured every book I could get my hands on. Education was free, and it was mine. Nobody could take it away from me. I had a history teacher, Mr. Patterson, who noticed. He started giving me extra assignments, more challenging work. He saw something in the angry, silent kid at the back of his classroom. "You're smart," he told me one day after class. Like really smart. But smart isn't enough. You need direction. You need a plan. He helped me apply for scholarships, talked to me about college like it was something I could actually achieve. Nobody had ever done that before. At 16, I aged out of the foster system in some states, but I maneuvered my situation. I convinced my last foster family to let me stay until I graduated high school, in exchange for paying rent with my dishwashing money. I graduated at 17, third in my class, with a full scholarship to a state university. I had $47 in that coffee can, and everything I owned fit in a single duffel bag. College was brutal. I worked 3 part-time jobs while carrying a full course load. I slept 4 hours a night. I ate ramen and whatever free food I could find at campus events. But I was free. For the first time since that gas station, I was in control of my own life. I majored in business and computer science, practical degrees that would lead to actual jobs. I graduated in 3.5 years, summa cum laude, with job offers from 2 tech companies. I chose the one in Seattle, packed my life into that same duffel bag, and moved across the country. I was 21 years old and absolutely determined to never be helpless again. The tech industry became my proving ground. I worked insane hours, took on projects nobody else wanted, learned everything I could about software development and business strategy. Within 3 years, I was a senior developer. Within 5, I was leading a team. I saved every penny I could, lived in a studio apartment that was barely bigger than a closet, drove a car that was older than me. And then I took the leap. At 28, I started my own company, a software solution for small businesses, inventory management, customer relations, all integrated into one affordable platform. I poured everything into it, my savings, my time, my soul. The first year, I almost went bankrupt twice. The second year, I landed 3 major clients. The third year, we went viral in the small business community. By the time I was 32, my company was worth $8 million. We had offices in 4 cities and employed over 100 people. I'd been featured in business magazines, interviewed on podcasts, invited to speak at conferences. I'd bought a house, a real house, with my name on the deed. I drove a car that actually started every time. I had a bank account with more zeros than I'd ever imagined as that 10-year-old kid watching a car drive away. And then they found me. It was a message on LinkedIn, of all places, from my mother. The profile picture showed a woman I barely recognized, older, grayer, wearing a smile that looked forced. The message was long, rambling, filled with excuses and explanations. They'd been going through a hard time. They'd made a terrible mistake. They'd been looking for me for years. She'd seen an article about my company.
She was so proud. She wanted to reconnect. I read it 3 times, sitting in my corner office with a view of the city skyline. My hands were shaking, not from sadness or longing, from rage, pure white-hot rage. She was proud? She wanted to reconnect? Where was she when I was washing dishes at 14 to buy my own clothes? Where was she when I was sleeping in a library because I had nowhere else to go during a gap between foster homes? Where was she when I graduated high school, when I graduated college, when I started my company?
I didn't respond immediately. I hired a private investigator instead. I wanted to know everything. Where they'd been, what they'd been doing, why they'd really left me. The report came back 2 weeks later, and it was exactly what I expected. They'd continued their nomadic lifestyle for a few years after abandoning me. My father had substance abuse issues, my mother enabled him, they'd had run-ins with the law, nothing major, but enough to paint a picture. Eventually, they'd settled in Arizona, working low-wage jobs, living in a trailer park. They weren't looking for redemption, they were looking for a lottery ticket. A successful son who could solve their financial problems. The private investigator found something else, too. I had a younger sister, born 2 years after they left me. Her name was Emma, and she was 12 years old. That information hit me like a truck. They'd left me but kept her? Or had they gotten their act together just enough to raise another child? Either way, it meant they'd made a choice. They'd chosen her over me, or they'd become better people after discarding me. I didn't know which was worse. I sat on that information for weeks. Part of me wanted to respond to my mother's message with every brutal truth about what my life had been like. Part of me wanted to send them a check just to prove I didn't need them. Part of me wanted to show up at their trailer and let them see exactly what they'd thrown away. But the strongest part of me, the part that had survived everything, wanted nothing at all. So that's what I gave them. Nothing. I blocked my mother on LinkedIn. I instructed my assistant to screen any calls or messages from anyone claiming to be family. I contacted a lawyer and made sure there were legal barriers in place if they ever tried to make any claims on my assets or my life. I protected myself the way I'd always protected myself, by building walls. But it didn't end there. They showed up at my office building 3 months later. Security called me, said there was a couple claiming to be my parents, demanding to see me. I watched them on the security camera feed. My father looked old, defeated, wearing a jacket that had seen better days. My mother stood next to him, that same forced smile, eyes darting around nervously. I could have gone down there. I could have confronted them, told them exactly what I thought of them. But you know what I did instead? I had security escort them off the property. I watched on the camera as they argued, as my mother cried, as my father got angry. And I felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not revenge, just nothing. They were strangers, less than strangers. They were ghosts from a nightmare I'd spent 20 years waking up from. They tried a few more times. Letters that my assistant threw away unopened, emails to my company that got filtered out. They even tried to contact some of my employees, spinning stories about being estranged family. Each time they were shut down. Each time they faded a little more back into the irrelevance they deserved. Here's what people don't understand about abandonment. It's not like a wound that heals and leaves a scar. It's more like a fundamental rewiring of how you see the world. Every relationship becomes transactional. Every kindness seems suspect. You succeed not because you believe in yourself, but because you're terrified of being helpless again. You build empires not out of ambition, but out of fear. I'm 35 now. My company is worth over $50 million. I've started a scholarship fund for foster kids aging out of the system. I mentor young entrepreneurs who come from difficult backgrounds. I've built a life that should feel fulfilling, that should feel like victory, and in many ways, it is. But there's still that 10-year-old kid inside me, standing in a gas station parking lot, watching a car drive away. Sometimes I wonder about my sister, Emma. She'd be 15 now. Does she know about me? Do they tell her she has an older brother who they left behind? Or is she growing up thinking she's an only child, unaware that her parents are capable of that level of cruelty? Part of me wants to reach out to her, to warn her, to be the family member I never had. But another part of me knows that inserting myself into her life would only create chaos. I've been in therapy for 3 years now. My therapist says I have complex PTSD, attachment issues, and a host of other clinical terms for what boils down to this: I don't trust anyone. I don't let anyone get close, and I've built my entire life around never being vulnerable again. She says this is both my greatest strength and my greatest weakness. She's probably right. People ask me sometimes if I'll ever forgive them, if I'll ever let them back into my life. The answer is no. Not out of spite or revenge, but because forgiveness implies that there's something worth salvaging. There isn't. They made their choice that day at the gas station, and I've made mine every day since. My choice is to move forward without them. My choice is to be the person they never believed I could be. My choice is to prove that family isn't about blood, it's about who shows up. The people who showed up for me were strangers. Carlos, who gave me a job and hot meals. Mr. Patterson, who believed I could go to college. The scholarship committee, who took a chance on a foster kid with nothing but grades and determination. The mentor at my first tech job who taught me everything he knew. These are my family, not the people who share my DNA and couldn't be bothered to look back as they drove away. So here I am, successful beyond anything I imagined possible as a scared 10-year-old kid, and here they are, reaching out after 25 years, expecting what? A tearful reunion? Financial support? Absolution? They're not getting any of it. It's too late. Not because I'm cruel or heartless, but because you can't abandon someone and then act surprised when they move on without you. The last time I heard anything about them was 6 months ago. My lawyer informed me that they'd attempted to sell their story to a tabloid. Billionaire refuses to help poverty-stricken parents. The tabloid didn't run it because even they could see through it. Even they could see that this wasn't a story about a heartless son. It was a story about consequences, about people who made a choice and have to live with it. I don't hate them. I genuinely don't. Hate requires caring, and I simply don't care anymore. They're nothing to me, less than nothing. They're a cautionary tale I tell myself when things get hard, a reminder of what happens when you give up, when you take the easy way out, when you abandon your responsibilities. They're the reason I never quit, even when my startup was failing. They're the reason I work so hard to create opportunities for kids in the foster system. They're the reason I've built something that can never be taken away from me. If they're watching this somehow, if someone shows them this video, here's what I want them to know. You don't get to be proud of me. You don't get to claim any part of my success. Every good thing in my life happened in spite of you, not because of you. You taught me nothing except what not to be. You gave me nothing except the motivation to become everything you weren't. And that's your legacy. Not a son who welcomes you back with open arms, but a son who proves every single day that he never needed you in the first place. To everyone else watching this, especially those who've been abandoned, forgotten, or cast aside, your story doesn't end where they left you. That gas station, that moment, that abandonment, it was the worst day of my life. But it was also the day I learned I was strong enough to survive anything. You are too. Build your empire, become unstoppable. And when they come back, because they always come back when you're successful, you get to decide if they deserve a place in the life you built without them. Me? I've already decided. The answer is no. It's too late. I don't care. And I've never been more at peace with any decision in my life. That's my story. From a gas station in Nevada to a corner office in Seattle. From abandoned to unstoppable. From broken to built. And I did it all without them. That's the sweetest victory of all.